Well, I say Hi, everyone. I think we're going to go ahead and work on getting started. So if we can just get seated, thank you. I want to welcome you all here tonight. Welcome to Missouri State. My name's Clyda DeWitt. I'm from the bookstore. And this evening, we have the honor to have two-time New York Times best-selling author Nancy Allen with us tonight. She will be discussing her book, Renegade, and that just came out. Very exciting. We will have that out to sell just outside the door tonight after the discussion. And there will be some other select books by Nancy Allen out there as well tonight. So just so you know, after her presentation, we will have Q&A, and we'll walk around and have a handheld microphone.
Could you speak up a little?
Sure, I'm sorry. After Nancy's presentation, there will be a Q&A, and we'll walk around with a handheld microphone and let people ask their questions. So if you'll just raise your hand if you have a question after her presentation, we'll get to you. For those that are live streaming, we just asked you enter your question into the chat, and we'll do our best to get to you as well. So we also have Krista. Thank you. I was like, I had this in my notes. I'm so sorry. Krista Hogan here with us, and she also has a very impressive resume. We're very honored to have both of these ladies here with us tonight. So I want to introduce Krista real quick. And Krista, for 20 years, has been the executive director of the Springfield Metropolitan Bar Association. Under her leadership, the Springfield Metropolitan Bar Association has been recognized at the local, state, and national level for advancing justice. Currently, she serves the Missouri Supreme Court Commission on Racial and Ethnic Fairness. Join me in welcoming Krista to the podium. She will be introducing our keynote speaker for the evening, Nancy Allen.
This thing on? Is it on? Okay, maybe if I put it up here. Does that work better? Nancy, are you need this? Are you gonna need this? Okay. In a recent ABA study, it was found that for women to achieve parity in the legal profession, it will take until the year 2181. 200 years before that, 1981. Nancy Applequist Allen blazed into the Springfield bar. There were 302 lawyers. 8 of them were female. That's 2%. Today, 40 years later, sorry about that, Nancy, but it's the truth. That number has increased 15-fold to nearly 30%. We're not there yet, but that's an impressive rate of change. How's that happened? Nancy Allen. When she blazed in circa 1981, she was undeniably a girl. That isn't what moved the needle. Nancy was a great lawyer. So let's talk about some other great lawyers. Elsie Arnold, young prosecuting attorney. The only thing she likes more than her Diet Coke is justice for abused children. Ruby Bossart, fresh out of Old Miss. Maybe the newest member of the bar, but she knows how to handle the good old boys. Then there's public defender and single mom Martha Foster, who takes a job as a public defender to support her son and for medical benefits. She finds she has no cases. She's a public defender. So she goes out and finds one. That brings us to big city lawyer boomerang to small town girl Lee Randall. When her dad's diagnosed with Alzheimer's, she leaves Chicago expecting an intolerably mundane life. But Chicago's crime scenes got nothing on Bassville, Arkansas, or Laclede County. Tonight, we're going to get acquainted with Assistant District Attorney Kate Stone, whose powerful moral character and powerful right hook lands her in anger management. Buy a book tonight and find out how that turns out. It's customary in an introduction along these lines to talk about the main events, accomplishments, and influence. That also you will find in the cover of the book. I believe that Nancy's influence is in her characters. I posit that Elsie, Ruby, Lee, Elsie, Ruby, Martha, Lee, and Kate. Elsie, Ruby, Martha, Lee. They come from different cities, and I've never had any of my homemade projects applauded, so that's very gratifying. They come from different cities and different states. They have a variety of virtues and voices, but they all share something. They're girls, they have grit, and they're great lawyers. Nobody comes to a Nancy Ellen event to hear anybody else speak, so here she is, Nancy Ellen.
Oh, mercy. Yes. Now I had to get organized. You know, I taught on this campus for 15 years, and I never walked into a class without one of these. So got one of those tonight. These are my visual aids, even though I cannot describe them better than Krista Hogan did. And I always work from a script because I found that as a teacher, if I worked from a script, I wouldn't cuss. Okay. I got it, but keeping our fingers crossed. Put this here. Really and truly does take me a minute. Put this here. Got that there. Put this here. This is such a privilege and a pleasure. And I would like to say that I am delighted to be here tonight with my very favorite people in all of Springfield, Missouri, because if you're here, you are on the list. This is the group of people who came out on a cold, bitter March night, and not only did you brave the weather, but everybody in this room braved the parking at Missouri State University. Oh, Lordy. I owe you. You are saints and heroes. It is a debt I can never repay. So I am in your debt. Thank you so much for being here. And I think that it is conceivable that there are some people watching virtually. Is that correct, my friend Spencer? Is that correct? Oh, for those of you watching virtually, thanks to you too. All righty. And I want to thank the Missouri State University Bookstore. Clyde DeWitt has really been the person who has headed up this, and thank you so much, Clyde. In addition, I want to give sincere thanks to my friend Krista Hogan for the stellar introduction. And now my heart is full for those groovy bags with my protagonist name on them. You know, when I loaded up my book tonight, I put it in a Walmart bag. My son made fun of me. I said, hey, they sell my books at Walmart. I'm proud. I got a better bag now. Next gig, much better bag for my visual aids. Krista actually is the true local celebrity who has taken the podium tonight. In addition to her many honors, and Krista's daughter, Rebecca, and I like to point out to her that she is awarded a trophy about twice a month, about every other week. Krista's given a trophy for something. But Krista, her most recent honor, Krista Hogan was the recipient of the 2022 Athena Award. Athena Award was in recognition of the excellence in her professional and her personal life, and also in thanks for the inspiration that Krista has provided to others in our community. So Krista, Krista, I think if I put you as a character, nobody'd believe it. They'd say she's not believable. I'll work on that. I will. So anyway, congratulations. Thank you all for being here. And so I have been invited here tonight to launch my newest book, which is Renegade. We're going to launch Renegade, but also to talk about my writing career, the path that brought me to this point today. And Renegade is the 7th novel that I've released in the past 8 years. And actually, technically, there's 2 full-length novels in this book. So actually, it's 8 novels in 8 years. And the story of how that came to pass. Oh, thank you. Lovely crew. Of course, they're my friends and neighbors, so how can I be surprised? But thanks so much. So it's been a journey. It's been a journey, and to start at the beginning, and Krista already provided, it is true that I'm a lawyer. I practiced law for 15 years, primarily as assistant Greene County prosecutor and assistant Missouri Attorney General. And for 15 years, I had the privilege of serving as a faculty member at Missouri State University. I taught the Law 231 class. I taught law classes in the FGB department in the College of Business, and it was a wonderful, wonderful experience. But now my sole occupation is that I am an author, and my books are currently published by 2 of the big 5 publishing houses in New York City. I am published by Little Brown and Grand Central Publishing in the Hachette Book Group, and I am published by William Morrow at HarperCollins. And the books I write are courtroom dramas. They're legal thrillers. So they're kind of like the books that John Grisham writes, except better. So much better. This is true. A St. Louis reviewer said in his article in the Riverfront Times that my books are John Grisham meets Dan Woodrell, and good God Almighty, I like that, because we all know John Grisham, he's the king of the legal thriller, and our friend Dan Woodrell, our literary friend from West Plains, Missouri, he's the king of hillbilly noir. So all I want is I want to be queen. I want to be the queen of the hillbilly noir legal thriller. That's all I ask. Now, my writing career began with a book entitled The Code of the Hills. The Code of the Hills, which is the first book in HarperCollins' Ozarks Mystery Series. And I tell you all about my educational background. I did not graduate with an MFA from Harvard, which led to a publishing contract because of my many, many, many close contracts in the New York publishing industry. No, that's not my story. I went to SMSU. Missouri State University at that time was SMSU, and I graduated class of 1978 with an English ed degree. And during that time, my 4 years on campus, because back when I went, my father said, you will get out of there in 4 years. When I was there, I took 1 creative writing class in 1977, and I, by God, got my money out of that class. So, after that, I went to Mizzou for law school, and then I practiced law. I taught law at the undergrad level, but I always wanted to write a book. And so, as about 11 years ago, I wrote one, and this was it, The Code of the Hills. Now, one significant way that I do vary from John Grisham is another thing that Krista has pointed out to you. My main characters in all the stack of books, they are always female. My protagonists, yes, are female. I have had an editor ask before, in the next book, don't you think you'd like to star a man? And my response was, I think we got enough books out there about men. So I star women, and the star of Code is Elsie Arnold. Elsie is a young assistant prosecutor in a fictional county in the Missouri Ozarks. And what HarperCollins liked about Elsie is not a perfect protagonist. She's not Superwoman. You know, there's not nearly as many female heroes in the thriller genre as there are men. But when you run across them, I think they're always a little one-dimensional because they're so perfectly perfect. Perfectly perfect in every way. They're always brilliant. The brilliant FBI agent or the brilliant medical examiner. And they never make mistakes. And I'm telling you, those women don't eat food. Maybe a salad, might pick at a salad, and they're exercising all the damn time. I mean, they get stressed out by their jobs and they strap on running shoes and run. And my girl Elsie, she's not like that. She is not perfect. Elsie is flawed. She has feet of clay. She cusses like a sailor. When it's eating time, she pulls in to the Sonic Drive-In and orders a foot-long coney dog, side of tots, wash it down with what? Why, a big old Diet Coke. Jump. Route 66 size. And when Elsie gets stressed, does she run? Does she run? Yeah. She runs to the nearest bar where she drinks like a fish. And she makes mistakes in her personal life, in her professional life. So she's a mixed bag, but her heart's in the right place. She is dedicated to seeing justice done in her neck of the woods. As Krista also pointed out, she could have made this speech, but here I am, so I'll continue. All of the females in this book, you know, when you write a female protagonist, they're speaking in your voice. They're all young women who are lawyers, who are trial lawyers, who are struggling with things, and they all are kind of mixed bag characters who have character quirks and flaws. And so, but you love them all so much because you know they're all a little bit of the author. And so then the books come out and you go to Goodreads because you want to go, ooh, how do you like my girl? How do you? And then sometimes it is daunting to read the reaction. Elsie's a mess. Kate Stone, unlikable. Ruby Bozarth is an idiot and the worst lawyer I ever saw. And we got two. Martha's a basket case and Leah's a jerk. Now, when you read that as the author of those female protagonists, I am inclined to go, excuse me? What? Seriously? Because you're thinking that if a person took that too seriously, well, it might hurt a gal's feelings, but fortunately, you get used to it as time goes by. So, if I'm not everybody's cup of tea, well, what are you going to do? All righty. But at any rate, back to the Code of the Hills. So, in the first book in the series, Code of the Hills, Elsie handles a difficult sex case, a sex case in which a man is charged with molesting his daughters. It explores the generational patterns of abuse. And did I have the background to write this book? Yeah. When I graduated from Mizzou and I came back to Springfield in the summer of '81 and entered the Greene County Prosecutor's Office, I was the only woman on staff. And so, because I was one of that first handful of women that broke into the legal profession in Springfield, Missouri, and I was the only woman in felony prosecution, they handed me a whole lot of sex cases. A lot of sex cases. It was like, oh my God, we've got a woman here. And so as a trial attorney, and this sounds shocking, but it's true, I cut my teeth on incest. It is no secret in this community that Greene County has the highest rate of crimes, sex crimes involving children in the state of Missouri. That was true in the 1980s when I started. It's still true today. So while I was a young woman handling all those terrible, terrible cases in my 20s, I did think upon occasion, good Lord, I ought to write a book. But about 30 years passed before I finally picked up the pen, and this is it. This was the book I was always going to write, Code of the Hills. So I wrote a book. I started it on January 1 that year, and I finished it at the end of June. And you know, a lot of people write a book. It's a big undertaking, but a lot of people do it. I will tell you, it's easier to start one than it is to finish one. And here's the secret. The toughest part is the middle, but I did it. And so I wanted to see that book between two covers. In fact, what I wanted, I had a dream, I wanted it to be published by one of the big 5 New York publishing houses. And so I did a little research and I learned that it'd be easy to go ahead and self-pub the book, but if I wanted to be traditionally published, I was gonna have to get a literary agent to make that happen. So I set out to find one. It took 10 months to find my first literary agent. Just took 6 months to write the book. Took 10 months to find somebody in New York who would agree to represent me. So I sent out, because you send out query letters, that's how you get one. I sent out so many query letters to agents in that 10-month period that I lost count of the number that were either rejected or just outright ignored. But I know that it was over 200. In fact, I know that because I quit counting at 200 and just kept sending them out. And I was rejected so many times that an ordinary person might have started to feel discouraged. But all that rejection made me insanely determined, and it was insane. But I swore I was going to get an agent and I would find a publisher and I would, by God, hold that traditionally published book in my hands, walk into Barnes & Noble and see it on the shelf. So I got the first agent. Took 10 months, got that first agent. She was in New York, young woman, seemed like a okay agency. And she kind of liked my book. And she said, now you're going to have to do rewrites and revisions. And I was down for that. I said, you bet. And so a year passed. And over that year, she'd get in touch with me once in a while, give me some patchy editorial advice. I'd try to make her happy. And then at the end of the year, and a year had passed, at the end of the year, she sent me an email. And I read that email and it said, Nancy, I've been thinking. The vulgar language that your protagonist, Elsie, uses is off-putting. It must go. And I thought, I don't think she understands my book. And I fired her. I fired that agent that very day. And I went out and I made me a new query letter and I went on the hunt for a new agent. And I, by God, found one in 2 weeks, because guess what? I was starting to figure out how this thing worked. So I had a new New York agent. She didn't work out. That's a long story, not for today. When I fired that agent after a year, I sent out another query letter. I had an agent in 2 days because it was a learning curve. And I landed with Jill Marr at Sandra Dykstra Literary Agency, and wonderful agent, so lovely. And she's been my agent now for 9 years, and the Dykstra Agency is one of the powerhouse agencies on the West Coast. As a matter of fact, Dykstra represents Tony Messenger. It's such a small world. So Jill Marr, we revised the book again. She sent it out and it landed on the desk of this lovely young editor at HarperCollins named Trish Daly. And Trish loved Elsie and she loved the Ozarks and she liked my voice. And so finally, I got an offer for a legal thriller series with HarperCollins, one of the big 5 houses in New York. I did it, but I did it because I refused to become discouraged, because I'm nuts. So I had a series, I had to write another book. So the next book I wrote, the sequel was A Killing at the Creek. And in this sequel, Elsie gets her first murder case. And Elsie wants a murder case. Every prosecutor wants to be assigned a murder because it's recognition of the attorney's competence and skill. So she wants a murder case and she gets a murder case, But the case she's assigned, a 15-year-old boy has been charged with the murder of a woman and then dumping her body in the creek, hence the title. But I would tell you, getting a 15-year-old defendant in your first murder case, that's really not a case anyone wants. No one would really want to be assigned that case. Did I have the chops to write that book? Yes. My first solo murder trial. 26-year-old prosecutor in Greene County, Missouri. I tried and convicted a 16-year-old boy of murder in the first degree. Fun fact, that murder trial was covered by a real life true detective magazine. I don't know how many of you still have your 1983 copy of Front Page Detective, but I do. I would like to point out at this juncture, this is not my picture on the cover. This is a woman I do not know. She is a stranger to me. My picture is in the middle. Oh my Lord, these pages have turned brown with age. But I'm wearing a little suit in front of the old Greene County Courthouse, standing on the steps, trying to look really, really tough. Although I was really, really scared. So after that book, HarperCollins renewed the contract, and I wrote 2 more Elsie books. The Wages of Sin. The Wages of Sin was inspired by actual cases in Greene County where domestic violence ends in murder. And here again, Springfield's #1. We got the highest rate of domestic violence in the state of Missouri, and the state of Missouri per capita. We are #2 in the country in cases of men killing women. So this has to do with a case of a victim who is 8 months pregnant and is beaten to death by her boyfriend. So it's a death penalty case. And so the book deals with the issue of the death penalty, and there are themes in those cases. First of all, it deals with the question and the character's struggle, is the death penalty ever an appropriate punishment? But we know that it is a legal punishment in Missouri, and so when they go ahead, it also deals, we see that even when you've got a crime that is so horrific that death could be seen as an appropriate penalty, the process of seeking the execution of another human being is a weighty and complex burden, and we see the characters struggle with that. But last in the Elsie series, A Wolf in the Woods deals with sex trafficking in the Ozarks. You know, a lot of people think that sex trafficking is just something that happens somewhere else on the East Coast or the West Coast or foreign countries, but it is here in the heartland too. The Western District U.S. Attorney's Office in Kansas City, many years they file more sex trafficking cases than any other place in the country, because it is here and our children and teens are vulnerable to this kind of insidious crime. And the book shows that the internet has given criminals a pathway to our young people. So right after I turned in my 3rd book to my editor, Trish, at HarperCollins, she called me on the phone and she said, "Nancy, I'm leaving HarperCollins." And I was, no, you can't go. And she said, "Yes, I'm leaving." And I was just so distressed. I was all torn up because I loved Trish. She was the one who opened the door to me at HarperCollins. She got my books between 2 covers, got me behind the iron curtain of New York City publishing. So I was really, really distraught and upset until 2 weeks later, when she called me again and Trish said, "Nancy, I'm at my new job. And I am in the James Patterson division of Little Brown. And Mr. Patterson would like to write a book with you if you're interested in working with him." And I was like, yeah, because James Patterson is king. James Patterson is the best-selling author in the world. He sells more books than anyone. He sells more books than Stephen King. He sells more books than Lee Child. He sells more books than John Grisham. And there is an entire division of Little Brown that's devoted to Patterson alone, because James Patterson alone is responsible for 1/3 of Hachette Book Group's, the publishing house's, entire annual sales. 1/3. So I said he's king. At Hachette Book Group, James Patterson is God. So when Trish came on board, they had a meeting, an editorial meeting, and Patterson said, I want to do a legal thriller, and I want to set it in the South, and I want to have a young female protagonist. Anyone have an idea who I might work with? Guess whose name came up? So, hello, juror number 3, and hello, James Patterson. Patterson and I worked on juror number 3 for a long time, and then even when the book was ready, they bumped around the publishing date, the release date, because that was the year that everything had to work around the first Bill Clinton James Patterson release, The President's Missing. But finally the day came, and juror number 3 was released on September 10, 2018, and it hit number 1 on the New York Times bestsellers list, and some interesting things started happening to me. I got a call from the publisher, who informed me that juror number 3 was the surprise hit for Little Brown in the year 2018. And then I got a fan letter that was not sent to my home address, but that was sent to my office address in Glass Hall. So when I finally saw it, it had been crumpled up like this, and then I unearthed it and ironed it out, and it was a fan letter from President Clinton. Handwritten. Now, his handwriting is so very strange, I had to kind of stare at it for 24 hours to make it out, like I was deciphering code. But when I did, he liked it. He liked it. And then Seth Meyers had a bid with Fred Armisen, and it was on Late Night with Seth Meyers, and the bit they did was with juror number 3, and they talked about the book, and Seth Meyers held it up, and Seth Meyers, by God, said my name on Late Night 2 times. He said, Miss Ellen, 2 times. And then one day, I was at home. I was at the bathroom at home. In fact, you think, why'd you have to tell us that? Well, I'm just telling you the story like it happened. So I was at home. My son was there. The phone rang, and I'm in the bathroom, and my son Ben said, Mom, James Patterson's calling on the landline. And I said, he is not. Stop it. Well, he was. And he was calling because he wanted to suggest that we do another book together. So we've been working together ever since. Last September, saw the release of The Jailhouse Lawyer. Jailhouse Lawyer, which opened at number 2 on the New York Times bestsellers list. It contains 2 novels. It contains Jailhouse Lawyer, which Mr. Patterson and I wrote. Oh, Jim and I wrote. I call him Jim. Jim and I wrote Jailhouse in the year 2020, and it also contains full-length novel entitled Power of Attorney, which was the book we wrote together in 2019. And I set that one in Arkansas. As Chris told you, it is set in Bassville, Arkansas. I'll tell you something no one ever knew. A friend of mine who was a graduate of Mount Vernon High School said, you know, we had a big rivalry with Cassville, and every time there's going to be a big game, do you know what we do in the dark of night? We'd take a can of white paint and we'd go to Cassville and we'd paint over the sea. And I thought it was the funniest thing I ever heard. And sometimes people tell me a story like that and I go, I can use that, and I use that in Power of Attorney, because guess what? A lot of the time in Bassville, Mo, what do they do in the night? Paint over the beach. So, at any rate, oh, there's always a little link to Missouri in every book I write. So, at any rate, you know, oh, and I forgot to say, okay, right now, Patterson and I are writing on our, we're working on our fourth novel together, and we're about to wrap it up. And he called today, Randy will tell you this, today it was Randy, because I'm at the computer. This is how I type, like this, because I never learned how to type. Dad, you were right. I should have taken a typing class. So I'm typing like this at the keyboard, and Randy said, Nancy, James Patterson's calling on the landline. And between the two of us, we couldn't get to the goddamn landline. I have moved away from my script, obviously. Okay, so we couldn't get to the landline on time, but I did get him called back, and he called back to say, okay, now we're going to start talking about book number 5. So when we wrap this one, we're starting on the next one. James Patterson. But today we are launching my newest book, Renegade, which is not a Patterson Allen book, just an Allen book. Renegade is a legal thriller. It's set in New York City. Now, 2 big differences just off the bat between Renegade and the other books I've written. Every book I have written until this one ends with a trial. If you all have read my legal thrillers, you know we got a build up, we got a terrible case, we have a jury trial, we got a big trial, and then there's a verdict, guilty, not guilty, yay, hooray, depending on whether I've got a prosecutor or a defense attorney as my main character, and then happy ending, the end. That's how they've always been. But in Renegade, we open with a trial. Chapter 1, a jury delivers a verdict, and it's the verdict in that case that initiates the action. Okay, and I just told you, it's set in New York City, which is not the Ozarks of my books, or the South of the Patterson Allen books, or Alice Allen Patterson books. So, you might think, Nancy, what are you doing writing a book in New York? After juror number 3, my agent was approached by an entertainment production company, and they pitched that they wanted to partner with me, that we were going to write a book, legal thriller, about assistant DA. They wanted it set in New York, and then we would pitch the book deal, and they would pitch it for film. Whenever anyone says the word film to me, I have heart palpitations. So as you can imagine, I said, okay, we partnered up. We pitched the book, Grand Central Publishing wanted it. I wrote it here. You see that it is here tonight. Is there going to be a film? I don't know. Maybe I don't know, because I'm not handling that part of the partnership. But here is something that I am dying to tell you and I can't. But here's as much of a hint as I can go. Right now, if I had to put my money on something we are going to see on the screen in the near future, I'd put my money on this girl. And I wish I could make a big announcement, and I can't. If I ever can, you'll be the first to know, because I will be shouting it from the rooftops. But my money's on Elsie. Okay, I can't say any more than that. But back to Renegade. Yeah, go Elsie, yeah. Back to Renegade. So it's set in New York, and it's a book about Kate Stone. She's an assistant DA in New York, and Kate has a little anger problem. That's her quirk, is she has a little bit of a temperamental streak. And so after she has an altercation in front of the criminal courts building in New York City, she is required to get anger therapy if she wants to keep her job. And so she goes in search of a support group. But as it happens, she ends up joining up with a circle of misfits who are people who are disenchanted with the criminal justice system. They're a circle of people who think they want to right wrongs, and they want to go and do justice, deliver justice in cases where the court has failed. Now, so she gets all caught up in that circle, but as you might imagine, the story shows the danger of what happens when people try to take the law into their own hands. So this is my Kate Stone book. It is Renegade, and they have said that they'd like to do a reading. Okay, I think nobody wants to hear me read for 100 hours. You know what I'm going to do? I'll read chapter 1, and guess what? I am a graduate of the Patterson School, and my chapters are real short. But we'll just do chapter 1 just for a little intro to Renegade. By the way, dedication page to Ben and Martha, my children, and Ben's here tonight. And my thanks to the person whom I almost always dedicate books to, and that's my husband, Randy, Randy is, every time I write a chapter, and like I said, they're all written by hand, I read them aloud to Randy, and I get Randy's feedback and Randy's suggestions, and it is so spot on that I couldn't have done it without you, Randy. Thank you so much.
My comments are, that's great.
Oh, yeah, that's really, I told you, it's great. It's brilliant. All righty, chapter 1 of Renegade. The hanging overhead lights cast a greenish tint on the face of the jury foreperson as she passed the verdict form to the bailiff. As I stared at her, I wondered, was the color green a good sign or a bad one? I was hungry for an omen, some visible indication regarding the outcome of the trial. I wanted the woman to look at me. My eyes bored into her profile as I leaned in, the palms of my hands flat on the wooden surface of the counsel table. With all my might, I sent her an unspoken message. Look over here, at me, do it. The foreman didn't glance my way, but I saw her briefly cut her eyes at the defense table before turning her attention to Judge Callahan. I exhaled, my shoulders sagging as I released the breath I'd been holding, because that was a bad sign. Bad for me, as the prosecutor anyway. Judge Callahan reached out his black shrouded arm. When the bailiff handed the verdict to him, the judge pushed his eyeglasses up over the prominent bump on the bridge of his nose and peered through them to read. I'd often wondered how he got the big bump on his nose. It looked like something or someone had broken it for him in the past. With every prejudiced ruling he'd made during the trial this past week, I fantasized about breaking his nose again. It would be simple. Just a sharp blow with my left fist. I imagined seeing blood spurt from his nostrils every time he ruled against me. He turned his gaze to the jury box, giving them a small smile, just a twist of his lips. He asked, "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, is this your verdict?" Several of them nodded. One juror, a young woman I'd pinned my hopes on, wore a defeated look as the foreman said, "It is, Your Honor." The judge shook the sheet of paper and it crackled into his microphone. He read, "We, the jury, find the defendant, Maxwell Alfred James, not guilty." The two defense lawyers flanking the defendant broke into jubilant grins. One of them slapped Max James on the back, snickering like a teenage boy. The sound of his laughter had an ugly ring. When the judge dismissed the jury, the young woman I'd been counting on shot me an apologetic glance. I wanted to shout, "Why didn't you hold out, for God's sake?" Because the verdict of the jury had to be unanimous to convict or acquit. Even one juror who refused to buckle would have meant a hung jury. If she'd hung him up, we would get a new trial and I'd get another shot. And I wanted another shot at Max James. I despised that man. As long as he walked free, he was a threat to the women of New York City. Once the jury departed, I saw James break away from his exultant legal counsel and beat a path straight to the bench. The sight of the defendant reaching out for a handshake from the judge almost made me lose my shit. Someone tapped me on the shoulder. I swiveled and came face to face with Anna Sohn, the victim in the felony assault case. She'd been present in court for the verdict. At the sight of her tear-stained face, my stomach twisted. I said, "Anna, I'm so sorry." "Why did he win, Kate?" she asked me. She hung her head. The jury didn't believe me. I took her hand and squeezed it. "Anna, you were an excellent witness, and you were strong during cross-examination. They never made you back down." But with a jury trial, there are no guarantees. Sometimes the jury doesn't make the right decision. They think I'm a liar. Though Anna spoke with an accent, her English was excellent for a woman who'd been born and raised in China. I wasn't lying when I told her she'd done well on the stand, and the medical evidence of her injuries was compelling. Injuries she'd received from the brutal beating inflicted by Max James. But James had the best defense team money could buy, and they were cronies of Judge Callahan. I had passion on my side, had that in spades, but they outgunned me. At 28, I was still a neophyte in the DA's office, and the defense lawyers knew every dirty trick in the playbook. Max James' girlfriend sidled over. She had been eavesdropping on us. At trial, the girlfriend had provided an alibi for James. As she drew near, I gave her the evil eye. She stared back with a sneer on her face. I broke eye contact first. A woman who would willingly perjure herself to defend a scumbag like Max James probably deserved my pity. In an undertone, I told Anna I'd call her in the morning. She nodded and left the courtroom, shooting a fearful glance at Max James as she departed. As I packed my laptop into my briefcase, shoving my file folders inside beside it, with angry thrusts, Judge Callahan called to me from the bench. "Miss Stone, don't forget to pick up your exhibits." I walked over and snatched up a packet of x-rays and photos from the table beside the court reporter. Max James was still snuggled up to the bench with his buddy, the judge. I was determined not to look his way, but when I heard James laugh, my eyes flew to his face. He was grinning, actually smirking at me. My heart began to pound, and I felt the blood rush up my neck. A common criminal, a serial assaulter of women, had the gall to laugh in my face because he had beat the justice system once again. Judge Callahan knew Max James's reputation as well as I did. I glared at the judge with a silent challenge. He swiveled in his high chair and turned his back to me. Returning to the counsel table, I swallowed the angry accusations I longed to toss at the judge. In a lot of ways, the miscarriage of justice was his fault. How many times had I jumped out of my chair during the trial to make valid objections to the smarmy tactics of the defense? Too many to count. I got to work out just flying out of and back into that chair. And Callahan had overruled me time after time. Then he let the defense counsel shut me down without cause. I didn't get a fair shot. I'm a great believer in the U.S. Constitution, but sometimes I wish they'd omitted that language about double jeopardy of the Fifth Amendment, because I deserved a second chance when it came to Max James. In addition to the x-rays, a couple of color photographs taken at the hospital spilled out when I tossed the packet onto the counsel table. Angry tears burned my eyes as I looked at Anna's bruised face, broken nose, black eye, swollen mouth. My left hand squeezed into a fist. With an effort, I relaxed my fingers, used them to massage the web of skin between my right thumb and forefinger. Chill, I thought. I picked the photos up with a careful hand, slipped them into my briefcase. Prolonged examination of her injuries was bad for my mental health. But even though I locked the pictures into my bag, I couldn't unsee them. The images were burned into my head. As I left the courtroom, carrying my briefcase along with my personal failure, I just wished I could have the opportunity to strike the same blows into Max James's smirking face that he'd enjoyed inflicting on Anna's son. I thought of how cleansing it would feel, how supremely satisfying. That's just a little tease. Chapter 2, she ends up outside on the sidewalk in front of the courthouse, and there's a scene that is reminiscent of, I don't know, the Oscars that we all saw last Sunday night. So, Randy says we got 10 minutes for a Q&A if there are any questions. Any questions? Any questions?
Are you going to continue to have only female protagonists, Nancy? Am I going to have to add to these bags?
So, I would tell you that there is going to be one break in the bag. The book number 4, which is going to be entitled The Number One Lawyer, which will be the next Alan Patterson, Patterson Allen, book that's released. Main character is a male. And we went around about it. And I said, it's going to be such a challenge. And he said, that'd be a real good thing for you. So anyway, and also, I worked for him. So the third time he said, I really think it's got to be a man. I said, you're right. But as I said, we were talking today about our 5th book and back to female. So anyway, there'll be one break. And I tell you, trying to think like a man, it's a bit of a challenge, but it was an excellent exercise. I love it. I'm so glad I did it. We did it. Yes.
Nancy, did you think it would be that hard to find?
George.
Yeah. Did you think it would be that hard to find somebody to help you get your books published, your agents and your companies?
I didn't have a clue, George. I did not have a clue because I didn't know a thing about it. And like I said, I was a novice. I had never written anything. I had friends in the English department, but we had never discussed it. And so really, I just started out cold. And I learned the ropes as I went along. And one thing I did figure out, because there's a lot of stuff on the internet, you can find out all kinds of things on the internet. And there are a lot of resources which give you tips and rules. And they tell you all the rules, all the things that you have to do, all the rules you have to follow if you want to get an agent or get published. And one thing I figured out about the end of that 1st or 2nd year, take those rules, bam! I am not a scofflaw. I never break the law. I always follow the law. But unwritten rules, if they're not working for me, I shouldn't care. So that was one of the first important things I learned, was all those unwritten rules out the window.
Collaborative process look like when you're working with James?
You know, a lot of people ask that question. And when I first knew that I was going to be working with Jim, that's what I wanted to know. And so I thought, well, I know how to find out. I'm just going to go get the names of some of his major co-authors, and I'll just Google them and see what they say about it. And I Googled them and did my research, and I found out nothing. Nothing. Because, as it turns out, the details of the creative partnership between James Patterson and his co-authors, it's like the secret formula for Coca-Cola. And so, just like with Coca-Cola, Cookie Rice is still in town, been making Coca-Cola at Ozarks Coca-Cola bottling all these years. And if I called Cookie right now, and I could, he's still alive, if I called Cookie, Jim would give me his number, if I called Cookie right now and said, tell me that secret formula, how much carbonated water, how many secret ingredients, he wouldn't tell me, and that's because he really likes getting to make Coca-Cola. And so I can't tell either, but one thing I can tell you that is interesting, and this is something I learned, is there's 2 kinds of writers in fiction. People know this generally, that there are pantsers, right by the seat of your pants, and there are outliners. And I was a pantser, and being a pantser, you get an idea for a book, and you've got it, you're inspired, and you just start page 1, chapter 1, off you go and write the book. Patterson is not a pantser. He's very, very famous for being an outliner. And so when you're working with James Patterson, you're not page 1, chapter 1, off we go, isn't this fun? We do not start writing the book until we have made a detailed outline of everything that happens in the book, chapter by chapter by chapter. Oh, good God, that's hard. And so I've seen it from both sides now, and I'll tell you that when you're starting a book, it's a lot more fun to be a pantser because, off you go, and it's so much fun. If you want to finish a book, it is much better to be an outliner because the outliner never has that curse, never runs into that problem of the dreaded writer's block. I mean, with a pantser, you hit a point at some point in that book. You reach a point and you think, what happens next? I don't know. I don't have a clue. And when you're writing under deadline, that is really, really scary. That does not happen to you when you write the Patterson way. You want to know what happens next? Look at your outline. That'll tell you. And so the business-like way is to do it the Patterson way. And he is a businessman. And so when you're an outliner, you know you're always going to get to have that fabulous, fabulous experience of writing the two most beautiful words in the English language, the end. Yeah.
Hi,
Hi.
this is the first book I've read of yours, and I've decided while you were talking, I'm going to read all of those books.
Oh, goodness sakes, yay!
But I have a question, maybe you can answer. If you were to write another chapter at the end of this book, what would it say?
You know I'm writing a sequel.
Are you?
I
was wondering.
am, and I'm working on it right now. And as you know, I leave a little cliffhanger. That's because Grand Central's got me signed on for a series. And I thought, well, let's give people something to look forward to. So I left it on a cliffhanger because I'm going to tell, we're starting out with the same day. So when this comes out in a year, if I ever finish the book, I'm certain
You didn't
to.
outline this one.
I didn't, Maggie. I should have. Look, I made such a liar out of myself. I should have. I'm pantsing it. And I don't know what happens next, but I do know the beginning of the book. I could see the beginning. It happens on the same day as the last page of that book. So you were on to something. All your instincts were correct.
Nancy,
Yes.
you left us hanging with Elsie.
Oh, I did. Oh,
Right,
it's
and
true.
those of us that are Elsie fans want to know what happens with Elsie.
And I would tell you, and Bev, you have asked, and other Elsie readers have asked, what about a book 5, Elsie? Why aren't you doing that? And really, it's what I had discussed before with Krista. I love Elsie. Elsie's my favorite girl. It's my favorite setting. It's my favorite series of all time. But if you're writing for fun, you'll do what's the most fun and write your favorite. Once it's a job, you're going for the payday. So I would say I would love to write Elsie 5 if Harper Collins would kick up the money that I get from Hachette Book Print. It'd be great, but I am for sale to the highest bidder right now. However, if our little secret hope comes true, then I'm back in bed with Elsie. So we're hoping to really, how do you make a TV screen? Oh, well, that's good. Okay, Becky.
Movie though, so.
Okay, is that it? Oh, my signs, I'm so sorry.
Hey, I'm curious as an author, what's more fulfilling to you, to write your own novels or to collaborate with James Patterson?
I would say that both of them are extremely satisfying in different ways. And there is a lot of pleasure in having the power. There is a lot of pleasure in having the total power over everything that happens. But I say there's also something very gratifying in two heads working better than one. And he is a creative genius in the thriller genre. He really is. He sees all the possibilities, and I bring my own things to the table, and putting the two together, there's some magic in that too. So I'd say that I really like it both ways. Here's another thing. If I'm working with Jim, I am on time, on schedule. I am so disciplined, making those outlines, staying with it, churning, we've got our book coming because we are on schedule, and that man has a work ethic you cannot believe. It's just incredible. He's 75 years old, and golly, I'm productive and disciplined when I work with him. When I work for me, I'm not quite so disciplined and productive. So there are advantages both ways. Randy says, oh, do you know what I know? Because I taught for 15 years. Everybody's got 60 minutes in them, and then it's bam, out of there. So our 60 minutes have come. I'm going to say one more thing. This is another dream come true, because one thing I always wanted was to have an author picture on the cover of a book, and they didn't put them on the Elsie books. And then there are author pictures on these books. Guess what? They're not of me. But when Renegade came out, ta-da! And I'd like to recognize my friend Dan Emery is the person I called upon and turned to when I knew I was going to have an author picture, and he came to my house and helped me out, and I said, make me look a little younger than I am, and Danny did his best. Thank you, Danny. I am so grateful to you all for coming out. Thank you so very, very much. I'm going to be signing books right outside.
Can I compliment you and not question you from
Oh.
a female standpoint really fast? Just a compliment.
Gosh,
I
yes.
guess I wanted to just, from the standpoint of being a reader of all your books, that I'm grateful for all of the connections that we can make from the conflict between what's right and what's right legally and what's fair and what's just. And I want you to know, just from a standpoint of other careers and things, that being an educator, every single book, I have connected in some way with every woman and with every circumstance that you created in every situation. And I'm not going to ask the question, but in my mind, I always wonder, how is she going to keep finding all of these scenarios? And I know that those of you in law know that they're there, just like I know that they're there in those unfair, unjust things in this world. So, but having those strong women be the badass fighters that they are, just like you are, is probably just, you're such an inspiration. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Oh,
Either like you.
Ron, good God, I can't top that. Oh my, Rhonda, thank you so much. Thank you, my friends, for being out here.